The AC Cobra, sold as the Ford Shelby AC Cobra in the United States and often known colloquially as the Shelby Cobra in that country, is an American-engined British sports car produced intermittently since 1962. History and development: like many British specialist manufacturers, AC cars had been using the Bristol straight six engine in its small volume production, including its AC Ace two-seater roadster. This had a hand-built body with a steel tube frame, and aluminium body panels that were made using English wheeling machines. The engine was a pre-World War II design of BMW which by the 1960s was considered dated. Bristol decided in 1961 to cease production of its engine and instead to use Chrysler 331 Equine V8 engines. AC started using the 2.6-litre Ford Zephyr engine in its cars. In September 1961, American automotive designer Carroll Shelby wrote to AC asking if they would build him a car modified to accept a V8 engine. AC agreed, provided a suitable engine could be found. Shelby went to Chevrolet to see if they would provide him with engines, but not wanting to add competition to the Corvette they said no. However, Ford wanted a car that could compete with the Corvette and they happened to have a brand new engine which could be used in this endeavor. Ford's 260 inner-cubed Hypo engine, a new lightweight, thin-wall cast small block V8 tuned for high performance. Ford provided Shelby with two engines. In January 1962, mechanics at AC Cars in Thames Ditton, Surrey fitted the prototype chassis CSX 2000 with a 260si Ford V8 borrowed from Ford in the UK. The 221si was never sent. However, early engineering drawings were titled AC Ace 3.6. After testing and modification, the engine and transmission were removed and the chassis was air-freighted to Shelby in Los Angeles on February 2, 1962. His team fitted it with an engine and transmission in less than 8 hours at Dean Moon's shop in Santa Fe Springs, California, and began road testing. Production proved to be easy, since AC had already made most of the modifications needed for the small block V8 when they installed the 2.6L Ford Zephyr engine, including the extensive rework of the AC Ace's front-end bodywork. The most important modification was the fitting of a stronger rear differential to handle the increased engine power. A Salisbury 4HU unit with inboard disc brakes to reduce unsprung weight was chosen instead of the old ENV unit. It was the same unit used on the Jaguar E-Type. On the production version, the inboard brakes were moved outboard to reduce cost. The only modification of the front end of the first Cobra from that of the AC Ace 2.6 was the steering box, which had to be moved outward to clear the wider V8 motor. The first 75 Cobra Mark I were fitted with a 260 Equine. The remaining 51 Mark I model were fitted with a larger version of the Windsor Ford engine, the 289 Equine V8. In late 1962, Alan Turner, AC's chief engineer, completed a major design change of the car's front end to accommodate rack and pinion steering while still using transverse leaf spring suspension. The new car entered production in early 1963 and was designated Mark II. The steering rack was borrowed from the MGB while the new steering column came from the VW Beetle. About 528 Mark II Cobras were produced to the summer of 1965. Since late 1962, when the new GM Stingray was shown off briefly by the Mk1 Cobra, the development of the Grand Sport Corvette program had continued at a pace and was thought to be going for a build series of 125 cars. This would allow GM to compete directly in the FIA GT class of racing. Just to compound this, Enzo Ferrari was trying to pull another fast one on the FIA with a request for the homologation of the 250 Lumina. The FIA had not forgotten the serious lack of production of the 250 GTO, which it had granted homologation in advance of Enzo's assured 100 minimum per year. Just 36 were produced over 3 years with two very different chassis, neither of which were too similar to the 250 GT, which was supposed to form the basis of the vehicle. In an effort to prepare for the task ahead, alternative engines were considered. The 289 Equine Leaf Spring Cobra dominated the U.S. domestic race series, with only one race lost in 3 years. the results in the FIA GT class were different. This was mainly due to the number of circuits that had much higher sustained speeds. Aerodynamics were more important and put the Roadster at a disadvantage. As a result, coupe versions were built. A stroker 289, and the larger 390/427 up to the Camry 427 was considered. Shelby was told at the 11th hour to use the Iron 427 accordion. There was little time to fully develop a competition vehicle. The coil spring Cobra production was slow and an insufficient number made to meet FIA's GT homologation. Therefore the SC was produced by making available to the general production the full race options for the street. By now Enzo was having races recategorized in Italy to prevent the almost inevitable defeat on home soil, as the 250 Lumina was not homologated as a GT and would have to run as a prototype. GM had pulled the plug on the Grand Sport, and so the 5 chassis that were built had to run as prototypes and so were placed in a difficult position to say the least. Shelby had earlier in 1964 fit a larger Ford FE engine of 390 cubic inches into CSX 2196. Unfortunately, the car was not able to receive the development it needed as resources were aimed at taking the crown from Ferrari in the GT class. Ken Miles drove and raced the FE-powered Mark II at Sebring and pronounced the car virtually undrivable, naming it the Turd. It failed to finish with the engine expiring due to damper failure. A new chassis was required, developed and designated Mark III. CSX 2196 was revised for the showdown at Nassau, which allowed a more relaxed class division of racing. This allowed the GT Cobras to run with prototype Ford GT, GM Grand Sport Corvettes and Lola Mk6. The first meeting that the GS Corvettes turned up to in 1963. It was for this event in 1964 that the flip-top Cobra was used. An aluminium 390 cubic inches engine was used. However, the car failed to finish. The new car was designed in cooperation with Ford in Detroit. A new chassis was built using 4A main chassis tubes, and coil spring suspension all around. The new car also had wide fenders and a larger radiator opening. It was powered by the side-oiler Ford 427 engine rated at 425 bhp, which provided a top speed of 164 mph in the standard model and 485 bhp with a top speed of 185 mph in the competition model. Cobra Mark III production began on January 1, 1965. 2 prototypes had been sent to the United States in October 1964. Cars were sent to the U.S. as unpainted rolling chassis, and they were finished in Shelby's workshop. Although an impressive automobile, the car was a financial failure and did not sell well. In fact, to save cost, most AC Cobra 427s were actually fitted with Ford's 428 cubic inches engine, a long-stroke, smaller bore, lower-cost engine, intended for road use rather than racing. It seems that a total of 300 Mark III cars were sent to Shelby in the USA during the years 1965 and 1966, including the competition version. 27 small block narrow fender versions, which were referred to as the AC 289, were sold in Europe. Unfortunately, the Mk3 missed homologation for the 1965 racing season and was not raced by the Shelby team. However, it was raced successfully by many privateers and went on to win races all the way into the 1970s. The remaining 31 unsold examples were detuned and fitted with windscreens for street use. Called SC for semi-competition, an original example can currently sell for $1.5 million, making it one of the most valuable Cobra variants. Shelby wanted the AC Cobras to be Corvette beaters, and at nearly 500 lb less than the Chevrolet Corvette, the lightweight Roadster accomplished that goal at Riverside International Raceway on February 2, 1963. Driver Dave McDonald piloted CSX 2026 past a field of Corvettes, Jaguars, Porsches, and Maseratis and recorded the Cobra's historic first-ever victory. Later, Shelby offered a drag package, known as the Dragon Snake, which won several NHRA national events with Bruce Larson or Ed Hedrick at the wheel of CSX 2093. only 5 Dragon Snake Cobras were produced by the factory, with 3 others prepared by customers using the drag package. An AC Cobra Coupe was calculated to have done 186 mph on the M1 motorway in 1964, driven by Jack Sears and Peter Bolton during shakedown tests prior to that year's Le Mans 24 Hours race. A common misconception is that this incident persuaded the British government to introduce the 70 mph maximum speed limit on UK motorways, which up until that year had no speed restrictions. Although government officials have cited the increasing accident death rate in the early 1960s as the principal motivation, the exploits of the AC Cars team merely highlighting the issue. The AC Cobra was a financial failure that led Ford and Carroll Shelby to discontinue importing cars from England in 1967. AC Cars kept producing the coil-spring AC Roadster with narrow fenders, a small block Ford 289, and called the car the AC 289. It was built and sold in Europe until late 1969. AC also produced the AC 428 until 1973. The AC Frewer was built on a stretched Cobra 427 Mk3 coil spring chassis using a very angular steel body designed and built by Petro Frewer. With the demise of the 428 and succeeding 3000 ME, AC shut their doors in 1984 and sold the AC name to a Scottish company. The company's tooling, and eventually the right to use the name, were licensed by Autocraft, a Cobra parts reseller and replica car manufacturer owned by Brian A. Unlis. Chassis numbering: the ACE chassis numbers read AEX. A being the car series and X being for export with left-hand drive. Later, with the introduction of the Bristol engine, the chassis numbers ran BEX. When switching to the Ford 2.6 engine, the ACE chassis numbers ran RS. For road speeders, Ken Rudd may have been influential in the choice of engine. The first Cobra chassis was left-hand drive and given the next letter in the alphabet, that is, C. Then SX for Shelby Export, that is exported to USA. Therefore the numbers ran CSX. For all the US export Cobras, the 4 following numbers ran from 2000 sequentially. When the MKII Cobra was built, the identification ran from CSX 3000, the 3 signifying coil spring suspension. For the European market, the cars were built wholly by AC Cars in Thames Ditton using engines and transmissions imported from Ford USA. These cars were given chassis numbers beginning COB, for Cobra Britain, that is RHD home market, and Cox. For Cobra Export, that is RHD export other than to USA. Cox cars had chassis numbers beginning with a 6 and then either a 0 to signify a leaf-sprung chassis or a 1 to signify a coil-sprung chassis. Autocraft era: Autocraft manufactured an AC 289 continuation car from 1982 as the Autocraft Mk4, basically a Mk3 with a 302 cubic inches Ford V8 and Borg-Warner T5 transmission. The Mk4 also received an independent suspension. Shortly thereafter, Carroll Shelby filed suit against AC Cars and Brian A. Unlis, in U.S. District Court in Los Angeles. The ensuing settlement resulted in Shelby and AC Cars Unlis releasing a joint press release whereby AC Unlis acknowledged that Carroll Shelby was the manufacturer of record of all the 1960s AC Cobra automobiles in the United States and that Shelby himself is the sole person allowed to call his car a Cobra. Nonetheless, production of the Mk4 continued, from 1987 as a joint venture with Ford as the AC Mk4 with a 250 HP at 4,200 rpm, 4,942 cc Ford V8 which provided a top speed of 215 km/h and 0 km/h in 5.2 seconds. At the 1990 Geneva Salon, the lightweight version was presented. Weight was down to 1,070 kg and power was up to 370 HP at 5,750 rpm thanks to alloy heads, a Holley 4-barrel carburetor, and no catalytic converter. While the lightweight did not meet U.S. federal regulations, the Mk4 did, and 480 cars of all versions were built until 1996. Post-Autocraft era, Brian Unlis left AC Cars in 1996 and the company was restructured under new management. Two new Cobra-style cars were launched in 1997, the Superblower, an aluminium-bodied car with a supercharged 4,942 cc's Ford V8 providing 320 bhp, and the cheaper Carbon Road series with a carbon fiber body and a 225 bhp version of the Ford V8 engine. 22 Superblowers and 37 CRSs were built between 1997 and 2001. A further variant, the 212 seconds per carat with a 3506 cc's 350 bhp twin-turbocharged Lotus V8 engine was introduced in 2000, but only 2 examples were built. In 2006, AC closed its UK factory and moved to Malta. However, only 3 right-hand drive carbon fiber ACMK versus powered by 340 bhp 5-litre Ford V8 engines were built before the Maltese operation closed. Since 2009, AC has licensed Kohlwing GmbH in Germany to produce the ACMK6, with an aluminium-coated composite body and powered by a 6.2-litre 440 bhp LS3 Chevrolet engine, or a 550 bhp supercharged version. In the UK, AC Heritage, based at Brooklands, is licensed by AC to produce traditional 289 and 427 continuation ACs. Cooper copyright. In an effort to improve top speed along the legendary Mulsanne Straight at the 24 Hours of Le Mans race, a number of enclosed, coupe variations were constructed using the leaf spring chassis and running gear of the AC Shelby Cobra Mark II. The most famous and numerous of these were the official works Shelby Daytona Cobra coupes. 6 were constructed, each being subtly different from the rest. AC cars also produced a Le Mans Cooper copyright. The car was a one-off and was nearly destroyed after a high-speed tire blowout at the 1964 Le Mans race. The car was qualified conservatively second in GT. The race started well with the AC chassis number A98, maintaining its position in the top 2 in GT and even leading the class for a time. This was not to last as an act of sabotage began to block the fuel filter. The car lost time until this was diagnosed and cleaned out. The car proceeded on at the predetermined conservative lap time and for the next stint remained trouble-free. The car was able to match the Shelby Daytona's speed despite running a higher differential ratio and a lower state of engine tune for reliability. The third significant Cobra-based coupe was the Wilmont Cobra Coupe built by the JWA racing team. A road-going Shelby Daytona Cobra replica is being manufactured by Superformance and Factory 5 Racing, a well-known kit car company. These cars use Pete Brock's bodywork designs, scaled up to increase room inside, and a newly designed space frame chassis. They are powered by Roush-built Ford Windsor engines. The Superformance Shelby Daytona Coupe is the only modern-day vehicle recognized by Shelby as a successor to the original coupes. Other road-going Shelby Daytona Cobra replicas include Daytona Sports Car from Australia. Counterfeit Cobras. In 1993, the Los Angeles Times exposed a Carroll Shelby scheme to counterfeit his own cars. With the price of an original 427 Ci. Cobra skyrocketing, Shelby had, by his own written declaration executed under penalty of perjury, caused the California Department of Motor Vehicles to utter 43 duplicate titles for vehicles that did not officially exist in company records. A letter from AC Cars confirmed the fact that the chassis numbers Shelby had obtained titles for were never manufactured, at least by AC Cars. Only 55 427 Ci. Cobras had been originally produced out of a block of serial numbers reserved for 100 vehicles. Shelby had taken advantage of a loophole in the California system that allowed one to obtain a duplicate title for a vehicle only on a written declaration, without the vehicle identification number appearing in the DMV's database or the declarant ever presenting an actual vehicle for inspection. Shelby later admitted that the chassis had been manufactured in 1991 and 92 by McCluskey Limited, an engineering firm in Torrance, California, and were not authentic AC chassis. Continuation cars. From the late 1980s onwards, Carroll Shelby and associated companies have built what are known in the hobby as continuation cars. Shelby authorized continuations of the original AC-built Cobra series. Produced in Las Vegas, Nevada, these cars retain the general style and appearance of their original 1960s ancestors, but are fitted with modern amenities. Initially, the car everyone wanted in a continuation was a 427 seconds per carat model, which was represented in the CSX 4000 series. This was meant to continue where the last 427 seconds per carat production left off, at approximately serial number CSX 3560 in the 1960s. The initial CSX 4000 series cars were completed from the chassis built by McCluskey Limited as well as other new parts and reconditioned Ford engines. Given the value of the vehicle, many extra cars have appeared over the years, even some sharing the same chassis number. Gradually, as the vintage part supply ran low, newly constructed frames and body panels were obtained from a variety of suppliers. The production of chassis numbers CSX 4001 to CSX 4999 took roughly 20 years and many different business relationships to complete. All models of Cobra produced are available now as continuations. In 2009, CSX 4999 was produced, concluding the 4000 series. Production has continued with the CSX 6000 serial numbers, featuring coilover suspension. The 289 FIA leaf spring race version of the car is reproduced as CSX 7000, and the original slab-side leaf spring street car is the CSX 8000 series. To date, most continuations are produced in fiberglass, with some ordering cars with aluminum or carbon fiber bodywork. In 2004, at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit, Ford unveiled a concept for a modernized AC Cobra. The Ford Shelby Cobra concept was a continuation of Ford's effort to bring back the retro sports cars that had been successful in the 1960s, including the Ford GT40 and the fifth-generation Ford Mustang. Cars were also produced by AC Cars until 2006, and since 2009 have been produced by AC Heritage, who are licensed by AC to produce 289 and 427 continuations. Super Snake. AC produced only 23 AC Cobra 427 competition roadsters. In 1966, one was selected and converted into a special model called the 427 Cobra to end all Cobras. The first one of these was originally part of a European promotional tour before its conversion. This conversion called for making the original racing model street legal with mufflers, a windshield and bumpers amongst other modifications. But some things were not modified, including the racing rear end, brakes and headers. The most notable modification is the addition of twin Paxton superchargers, TPS. Shelby crafted two 427 models by himself, adding a TPS. He gave Bill Cosby one and kept one for himself, the CSX 3303. He eventually converted the competition roadster to a street-legal car with windshields, mufflers, etc. and named it the 427 SC. Another non-competition 427 roadster, CSX 3303, was converted and given to Shelby's close friend, entertainer Bill Cosby. Cosby attempted to drive the super-fast Cobra, but had issues with keeping it under control. He recounted his experience on his 1968 stand-up comedy album 200 mph. Cosby gave the car back to Shelby, who then shipped it out to one of their dealers in San Francisco, S&C Ford on Van Ness Avenue. S&C Ford then sold it to customer Tony Maxey. Maxey, suffering the same issues as Cosby did with the car, lost control and drove it off a cliff, landing in the Pacific Ocean waters. Shelby's original model, CSX 3015, was kept by Carroll Shelby himself over the years as a personal car, sometimes entering it into local races like the Turismo's Visitadors Cannonball Run race in Nevada, where he was waking up whole towns, blowing out windows, throwing belts and catching fire a couple of times, but finishing. The CSX 3015 was auctioned on January 22, 2007, at the Barrett-Jackson Collector Car event in Scottsdale, Arizona, for $5 million plus commission, a record for a vehicle made in the U.S. See also, Bill Thomas Cheetah, the 1963 started private venture challenger to the Cobra, The Snake and the Stallion, References, Notes. Bibliography. External links, AC Cobra at DMOZ, AC Cobra at the Internet Movie Cars Database, Shelby Automobiles Incorporated, Las Vegas, Nevada, thecobraferrariwars.com, AC Cars website, AC Heritage website, AC Cobra 427 exterior and interior in 3D 4K UHD.